That's the good stuff right here. Hard, soft literature. Yeah. I mean, sort of, kind of. I tell you what, I'll check it out. You know, I'm not normally one to destroy books, but so I'm just kind of big for it. Hiya folks, Fruit and Doggy here to do another book discussion, and this time I'm discussing Labyrinth by, I want to say Kate Moss. I almost want to say Kate Mossy, but just going to read the summary of this. And this book was published 2005, and the pages, it is 485 pages long, a little bit shy of 500. And reading the book summary, in this extraordinary thriller, rich in the atmosphere of medieval and contemporary France, the lives of two women born centuries apart are linked by a common destiny. July 2005. In the Pyrenees Mountains near I'm gonna butcher names. Carcassonne, Alice Tanner, a volunteer in an archaeological dig, stumbles into a cave and makes a startling discovery. Two crumbling skeletons, strange writings on the walls in the pattern of a labyrinth. Between the skeletons, a stone ring and a small leather bag. Too late, Alice realizes that she has set in motion a terrifying sequence of events, and her destiny is inextricably tied up with the fate of those called heretics 800 years before. July 1209. On the eve of a brutal crusade sent by the Pope to stamp out a heresy, a crusade that will rip apart southern France, 17-year-old Alice is given a ring and a mysterious book for safekeeping by her father as he leaves to fight the Crusaders. The book, he says, contains the secret of the true Grail. In the ring, inscribed with the labyrinth, will identify a guardian of the Grail. As crusading armies led by church potentates and nobles of northern France gather outside the city walls of Carcassonne, it will take great sacrifice to keep safe the secret of the labyrinth, a secret that has been guarded for thousands of years. And on the cover it says, 3 secrets, 2 women, 1 Grail. And then it's a picture of a labyrinth. And how to summarize this book? A lot of my problems with the story relates to the entirety, especially the ending with sort of what the secrets were. And so this discussion would be quite heavily on the spoilers, just by its nature. So I do want to be very upfront about that, especially since it's a longer book. And so if you have any interest, I would suggest perhaps looking at the Amazon page, looking at reviews, seeing if this might be up your alley first, because as you're reading along, going through the story, if you watch the rest of my review or my discussion, I could spoil the storyline for you and what's coming up, and I would really hate to do that inadvertently. And I don't think, I mean, this is definitely part of the spoiler, but part of the secret, and then with the Grail, it really is quite stereotypical with it being, it's the Holy Grail. And if you're familiar with the general concept or the lore of how the Grail works, it technically doesn't seem to give eternal life. It doesn't grant immortality, but it greatly expands one's lifespan. So somebody who drinks from the Grail might live hundreds of years as opposed to, 80 years old, for instance. And the entire plot line is basically one group of people, a very small sect that is aware of the books, that is knowledgeable of the Holy Grail, who protect it, who safeguard it, because I suppose in theory, what their purpose is to maintain this strict secrecy, because throughout different periods of time, throughout different points in human history, certain individuals will come around who are so great, who are so influential and grand, that they need, that it's seen as that their continued existence is so beneficial that they are selected to drink from the Grail, gain an extended lifespan, and to continue their work. And if I remember right, an example of that were just some of your classic stereotypical individuals. I think Muhammad was listed as one, which, based on how much warmongering he committed in his lifetime, that seems like a strange choice, just saying. Probably Jesus, not Gandhi. It would have been, the original Buddha, whose name escapes me. Usually better with names, so I apologize for that escaping my memory right now. But various individuals like that. But what strikes me as very ironic or comical about that is there's so many individuals who would, in theory, have been worthy of that distinction, who would likely just be plain Jane folk, or who might not be names that roll off the tongue now, but would have been incredibly useful to keep around. So, for instance, basic like medical practitioners, individuals who were expert in their field of practice, who saved dozens if not hundreds of lives, and would have been a great benefit to keep around for a longer period of time. But, you know, that wouldn't have happened because at this point they were all just stuck in France and they just need to keep the Grail secret. And I suppose why I don't really find this story so grand is because it's very unbelievable. It's not very realistic. It's not very well grounded or sensible. And it's because basically it's trying to take our world as it is now and then taking this concept and just throwing it in and blending it into our actual reality. And it just doesn't really work that incredibly well. It's not very logical because, again, the reason they're keeping it such a secret is because they're afraid of the possible ramifications. But it didn't really give a great example of what could happen. I mean, take a horrid dictator. Obviously, that'd be terrible if they had an expanded lifespan and lived beyond their natural dying point when they're already a horrid person and doing great atrocities. But the network of people who were trying to get the Grail, who were the antagonists, there's not really a lot to support the fact that they're horrendously malicious, that if they obtain the Grail and this expanded lifespan, that it would just be a horrid detriment to humanity. It doesn't really support that well enough. I mean, sure, they're greedy and conspiring and selfish and even some degrees jealous of each other, but, you know, on the other hand, with the secret society that keeps it strictly tamped down, aren't they in some ways possessing those same characteristics, because they are selfishly and secretly guarding this secret so that no others can have this expanded lifespan? It's only them who get to entertain that benefit. You know, it's okay when we do it, but no, you guys can't obtain this secret. You guys can't be let in. So say us. I don't know. It just didn't really work incredibly well for me. I will point out an interesting feature about the book is that the chapters are typically very short. Let me see. Looking Yeah, a book that contains about 500 pages has 80 odd chapters, so about 6 pages per chapter on average. That'd be 480 pages. And I've certainly read plenty of books that do that. I just always find that kind of interesting or novel. But I will mention as well that with the summary of the book I read earlier, it does ping pong back and forth between the two main characters' perspectives, the two female leads, and then actually it does take other people's perspectives as well. So it can be a little hard to follow at first, and I really wasn't too enthralled through the first probably 60, 70 pages. It was a bit of a slog, and even at later points I was kind of struggling and losing interest. But I'm somewhat glad that I finished it, but ultimately I don't think the payoff was that well worth it. I don't think it was worth reading through the whole thing. And as I already mentioned, with the pages as short as they are, me struggling to get through it is quite the condemnation, because it should not be hard to get through a chapter when it's only about 6 to 10 pages, but I would really struggle at times. I think that another problem with the story is the antagonists, the villains. They didn't seem very well fleshed out. They didn't seem incredibly realistic. They seem like Alais, the woman from more medieval France 1200, her sister was one of the antagonists. And it just didn't seem incredibly clear what her real motivations were, what she was trying to obtain, or why she was so antagonistic to her sister. It's definitely, her actions definitely go beyond just the point of sibling rivalry, but that's about the only support that's given as to why she's acting the way she does. The antagonists throughout the book, on the one hand, they're much more successful than would be necessarily expected, yet they fall just short of getting everything they're looking for and that they need to be successful. They just fall shy. It's very convenient and very contrived that things just don't quite work out for them, despite how they're how they conspire to take over that small group and obtain the Grail for themselves, despite all of their wicked plans and their murderous ways, and how they kind of surreptitiously, I think I pronounced that correctly, surreptitiously are successful to an extent. It just sort of works out, but just happened to stumble at the very end. I just thought that was very contrived, and I just think it could have been done much better with a book of this length, with the different settings and characters that they balance between 2 time periods. I think it would have been more a stronger conflict and a greater opposition if they had actually succeeded, if a handful of people perhaps had obtained an extended lifespan, and that would have given a little bit more tooth to the enemy. And I would also have to ask, this isn't incredibly clear through the book, but my understanding is that it's only giving an extended lifespan. They're not immortal, and so I don't think they're invulnerable either. So if an individual who drank from the Grail, if they were shot or otherwise suffered a fatal blow, it's like, okay, are you dying? Are you going to die from this? Are you granted some degree of a healing factor or greater resistance? I don't know. I have no idea. It's not incredibly clear about that. And I will admit that I did read this book thinking that somebody kind of, how to put it, I bought this book thinking somebody else might enjoy it, but it's like, hey, I'm holding on to it for now. I might as well at least give it a read while I have it. But I just don't think it was really for me, and I'm not, this isn't like a feminist only book. This isn't girl power and if you're a man you might as well not read it. It's not that divisive by any means. I wouldn't have read all the way through if it was that cheesy and heavy-handed, but this is how the author describes it on the back cover. It says, the Grail legends are usually about men with swords and women getting rescued. Which, to be fair, that's usually true with medieval stories and fantasies. But then I thought, you know, I want the women to have the swords. But despite saying that, her actions and her writing doesn't actually support that. The women don't have the swords. The women aren't the ones who are engaging in the combat and being the ones charging in, and they are the protagonists, but they're not the ones really fighting. So it just kind of fell flat. She didn't even really live up to her own thoughts or expectations there. And then to continue the rest of it, it's all about them doing their things. They get lots of sex and they fall in love. But that's not the point of the story for them. They are the heroes. And yeah, it throws in some romance scenes. It does throw in some sex scenes. I wasn't exactly thrilled by that. I thought that was a bit of a distraction and somewhat unnecessary. But I don't know. In some ways, I think that it sort of undermines not female authors, but if the book is supposed to be about female empowerment, and then I don't know that it subjugates women or makes them into objectifies them, but it kind of, I don't know, it throws me off a little bit, where it's like, it's not just about the sex, but I'm sure not going to admit that entirely. Hey, you know, I know who I'm writing this for. Wait, that's sexist against women, but I'm not going to take it out. I don't know. That's how I take it. It seems a little bit funny to me. And yes, again, I can't deny that in most fantasy sorts of stories, medieval settings and so forth, where even if it's male protagonists, they usually have a love interest as well. They have what's the word? Cheesy sort of romance, a cheesy love story, love at first sight kind of nonsense, but I don't know. That's just something that struck me. I think it's kind of funny. And actually, kind of getting back to the idea of the women being the heroes, if it weren't for key male figures in this story, the female protagonists would have failed. They wouldn't have succeeded. They weren't sufficient on their own. So, again, not really living up to her own claims and expectations. So, not trying to quash the idea of women empowerment, but I just don't think that this necessarily lives up to that. And I would think that if, you know, you're a lady who's wanting to read a book that kind of hits upon that theme more, I would think other books could do that more strongly and more capably. At least I sure hope so. But that's my interpretation. If you've read this book and didn't take it that way, if I'm mansplaining and I'm going way off and I'm just trashing this book because I'm a sexist pig and a chauvinist, then feel free to enlighten me in the comments. But otherwise, I mean, I thought it was hard to get through. I didn't think it was really worth it. but I'll admit that maybe it just wasn't for me. The tone wasn't to my style, so I would say borrow it. I'm gonna take the safe route, the diplomatic route on this one. Maybe I'm selling out and being a chicken. Who knows? Don't roast me too hard though, ladies. Mercy, mercy. But anyways, have a good one, folks. Have a good attitude. Try not to be too uptight and upset about junk. It's just a book. I don't know. I'm just rambling. Have a good one.